good to know you and your teammates' strengths and weaknesses so you can leverage those strengths and accommodate for those weaknesses throughout your strategy. Hey y'all, it's Katie and welcome back to my channel. Today is episode 1 in a brand new series on Deka team strategy and transitions. So in this episode, we'll be talking specifically on the strategy side with the broad scope of things and different considerations you need to take into account when building your strategy. And in episodes 2 and 3, we'll be talking about very specific and efficient transitions that you can implement in your races. So let's dive in. Now, first up, big shout out to Kevin and Jess from Underdog Fitness. They already did an amazing couple of videos on Deka's team strategy where they show you how to specifically assign athletes to specific zones. That's literally the same method that I use when I create team strategies and stuff for my athletes and myself. So definitely check out that video. It's really, really well done. But today, I don't want to copy that video. We're not going to be going over that same principle again, just in different wording. Today, we're going to be looking at some different things. So first up is the broad scope. We'll be looking at Deka as a whole and see which transitions are worth it and which transitions are not really worth it. And let me put a little disclaimer here. If you're new or less fit coming into Deka, and this is your first team event, don't worry. Take these with a grain of salt. If you need to transition and swap things up, totally fine too. Take it one zone at a time, swap more frequently, rest before you get tired, and lean on your teammate. But if you're looking to shave a few seconds off your team time, then here's a few really effective methods to where you don't waste any time with tedious transitions. So first up, running. Obviously, this doesn't apply to the Deka Strong, and this hardly applies to the Deka Mile because in the running transitions for the Deka Mile, you simply, one teammate runs and comes back. There's no swapping with the laps. So this specifically applies to the fit. So at Deka Fits, most of the time they're 2 or 3 laps depending on your venue. And honestly, run transitions don't really take a lot of time. If you can start jogging a little bit with your teammate before you pass the baton, that's ideal because then you waste as few seconds as possible with the transition. Whereas if you come to a dead stop and then go, that's probably the quickest way to do it. But at the same time, running transitions don't really take that much time, and the time you're going to gain than if one teammate did all the laps and got really fatigued and tired and they slowed down. You're gonna save a lot more time with that short transition than you would have on those fatigued, slow running laps. So splitting up that run work might be more beneficial than worrying about the transitions there. But whether you're doing the fit or the mile, the biggest transition time gobbler here is going to be staying near your teammate. If you are kind of milling about, grabbing a drink of water, starting a conversation with your judge, not paying attention to the working teammate, and they finish with their zone and you're not ready to go with your run, then that is what takes the most time, honestly. Because if you have to reorient, oh, what? Oh my goodness, run. It takes a lot of extra time, especially if they have to hunt you down or catch your attention again. All of those seconds add up over time. So stay attentive, make sure you're following your teammate, and keep up with their reps. But getting into the zones here, zone 1 on the lunges, the most effective method is to do all the work for one teammate. So if the teammate is capable of doing all 30 lunges without it over fatiguing them for the rest of the race, do it that way. That is the most efficient because then you're not having to worry about transitioning rams and mat, one teammate on the mat, off the mat. It just saves a lot of extra time. Zone 2 on the row. This one is personal preference in a lot of cases. I would say at least one swap. And if you need a second swap, you can do a second swap. Okay, those foot straps can get really tricky and you can get caught up in the foot straps a little bit. So at least one transition. I think that 1 is kind of the sweet spot because having one teammate do all 500 meters can be quite fatiguing for the rest of the race. So that little bit of transition time might help you maintain a faster pace on the rower and set you up better in the rest of the race because you're able to split that fatigue between 2 partners and not have one partner accumulate all that fatigue up front. If you need a second transition though, if you need to do like 150, 200, 150, something along those lines, you can, as long as that second transition doesn't take more time than the extra fatigue would induce. Okay, so if you split it up 250, 250, and you start tapering off and your pace slows down a little bit, if that is slower than that extra transition would have been, then it's worth it to do the second transition. If your paces stay and maintain and you're not dropping off pace with that one swap, then just keep the one swap. You don't need to. I just like to avoid as many transitions as possible on the rower because those foot straps can be finicky. And just because you're consistent with it in practice, that one time you hit it in competition and you get the foot strap stuck and it's awful, right? It can take up a lot of extra time. So just avoid extra transitions there if you can. Zone 3 and Zone 4 are going to be super simple here because they are fastest when they're done by one teammate. Okay, the box, you can get in a rhythm, go over it really quick. Same thing with the sit-up. You are very quick. If the one teammate has to step out from the box or one team has to roll off the mat and transition somebody else onto the mat, it gets very slow and that transition time gobbles up a lot of extra seconds. So making sure that you have one teammate on each of those can speed things along quickly. The ski, Zone 5. This one is your free-for-all. You can transition as much as you need to because this is a very easy swap here. I love this one. This one, you simply pass the handles to your teammate and they go, okay? In hyrox, you have to take the handles all the way to the top, let them go, step off, and then your teammate grabs them and keeps going. In Deka, you do not have to release the handles. You can hand them straight to your partner. So totally fine, totally legal. Do it. It saves you a lot of time. Zone 6 is kind of conditional here. This is the farmer's carry, and when you're transitioning dumbbells, it really depends on whether you're in a same-sex team or a co-ed team. If you're co-ed, you can easily prep on the dumbbells, be ready to go, so when your teammate crosses that line, you can go immediately. With a same-sex team, if they're using the same dumbbells that you need, then they have to cross the line, drop the dumbbells, step out of the way, you step in, pick up the dumbbells and go. And that takes a lot of extra time, a lot of extra seconds in that transition. So if you're in a same-sex team, reduce those swaps as many times as possible, okay? One swap is ideal if you need any at all. If one person can take all the farmer, amazing, as long as it doesn't fatigue them for later in the race. For co-ed teams, I would say you can swap as many times as you need because those swaps are very quick. But the caveat here would be if your partner takes a lot of the bike, I would say take a few farmers in a row before the bike so they can get prepped on the bike, rest, and be ready to smash it whenever it's time. Just depends on you, your partner, and what your strengths are. Which leads us to the bike. So here, the quickest way to do it is 0 or 1 swaps. If one partner is able to hammer out those 25 calories very quickly, obviously take that route. If you need one swap where somebody hammers it, the other person finishes it off a little bit, no big deal. That is the fastest method. If you and your teammate need a transition, see if you can do 10 to 15 calories without your RPMs dropping too much. If your RPMs start dropping significantly before you can finish your allocated calories, then that means you can't sustain that. You need to add another swap in there. So make sure if you're planning one swap and you have 12 calories, that's your responsibility, right? You need to be able to hold that RPM as consistent as you can through those 12 calories. And then swap when you need to, right? If you can't hold that RPM and you start tapering down before the end of your allocated calories, then I would say you need to add more transitions in. Or have your other teammate take more of the calories for you, because you can either give them a little bit more work or add another swap in. However, if you're not both strength athletes or the bike is a little bit harder for you, that's totally fine. 2 to 4 swaps I would say is ideal. Any more than 4 and it's not really worth it unless your RPMs are dropping a lot. And moving on to Zone 8, this one swaps are typically pretty fast. So if you can stay on top of it and keep a good rhythm going, your swap should look something like tossing over the shoulder. One person steps out of the way, the other person steps right in and keeps going, okay? If that's same sex. If it's co-ed, no big deal because you just prep with your ball next to them and they finish theirs, it hits the floor, you go immediately, okay? Co-ed swaps are super easy on the dead ball, but even same-sex swaps are not bad on the dead ball because you just run out of the way and then your partner steps in and keeps going for you. So not a big deal. As long as you're able to maintain consistent pacing and keep repping it out, you're gonna be tired from the bike. That's okay. You can push through a little fatigue to keep repping it out. Hey, future Katie here. I am editing my video currently, and I realized on Zone 8, I was only talking about the shoulder over, not the wall over. So in the Deka fit, when you're doing the wall over variation, in a team, you have to cross the midline of the wall. So if I step in the frame, throw the ball over, I have to step out, cross the midline of the frame, then my partner can step in and grab the ball. Okay, that's how a transition works in the Deka Fit. Yeah, that one is just a little bit slower, so make sure you break that one up a little bit. Especially with the new dead balls, it's a little bit slow. But again, communication is key, and just making sure that you're talking to your teammate about how many reps they want to complete before you step in, and making sure you're on the correct side of the yoke whenever they do throw the dead ball over for the last time. Okay, back to other Katie. Which means we're hitting zone 9. At this point in the race, you're gonna be pretty dang tired. You're gonna be redlining, it's gonna be hard. Okay, which means I prefer, one of my favorite methods is swapping every time. Okay, the exception here is if you have one teammate that is incapable of pushing the tank at this prescribed level, then one teammate can take all of it, or one teammate can take majority, where they only give the other teammate one down and back. That's probably a pretty rare case. Pretty much, if you're capable of pushing the tank, you should swap every other time, putting the stronger teammate on 1, 3, and 5. That is a pretty tried and true method of getting through the tank, because at that point, it's hard, you're gonna need rest. So if you do multiple down and backs in a row, that's gonna cause a lot of extra fatigue. And if you do that, you're probably gonna slow down on the second, third down and backs that you do, because your pace is gonna slow as you get tired and you're not getting the rest you need to be able to push more powerfully. So by swapping every other, it's going to give you that rest time so you can hit the next one with a little extra oomph to it. Which means we're at the burpees, zone 10. This one is kind of survival mode. A common joke at our gym is that at the end we always do 5, 5, 5, 5. That is kind of our baseline, you could say. Our baseline strategy is 5, 5, 5, 5, and then you're done. So that's 3 swaps total. If you have faster burpees, or you're more confident on the burpees, maybe you had more rest on the tank so you can hit them a little harder than your teammate can, whatever, feel free to flex those numbers, okay? That's just a starting point that we use in our strategies, and then we flex based on energy levels, fatigue. We communicate really well with our teammates so we can know when they need to swap. So if I need to take 7, then you do 4, then I do another 7, and then whatever, the other person finishes off, right? Not a big deal. I find that the burpees are a little bit more of like a give and take, and as long as you swap out before you fatigue and before your pace really slows down, that's the important part. If you're really having to eke out that last rep, you've gone too far, okay? You should be able to do one more, put it down, get off the mat. So generally swap out as many times as you need to, but 5, 5, 5, 5 is kind of a good starting place, at least in theory. Once you get on the floor and in the race, it might change a little bit, but that's okay. I like a little flex in my strategies when I create them. So this is one of those flex zones typically. And after that, you just have to cross the finish line or set the ram down and you're golden. So easy peasy, right? But on to bar 2, considerations. And here it's good to know you and your teammates' strengths and weaknesses so you can leverage those strengths and accommodate for those weaknesses throughout your strategy. So height, strength, weight, speed, power, agility, all of these can be leveraged in specific zones so that you can create the best possible strategy for you and your teammate. And of course, with any strategy, it's gonna have to be tweaked along the way. So you might run that strategy in sim and then realize, oh no, I took too many dead balls and then I was too fatigued for the tank. So you need to kind of swap those a little bit. Whatever that strategy is for you, totally fine. That's normal and should be expected when you create a strategy. But first consideration here is height. So height can either be a very good thing or a not so good thing in certain zones. So a good example here is the box and the sit-up. So I have one athlete I'm working with right now who is just over 5 feet, barely, and the box is a really, really hard one for her. Whereas the sit-ups, she can do sit-ups super fast like nobody's business because her lever arm in her sit-up is a lot shorter than, let's say, like a 6'4" guy, right? If you're 6'4", that box relative to your height is a lot shorter than if I was barely 5 foot. So the box for him is gonna be easy, whereas the box for her is gonna be really hard. And vice versa, on the sit-up, she's gonna have an easier time, whereas that 6'4" torso is gonna be a lot slower moving in the sit-up if you're taller. So height can be a very good advantage on some zones, but also not so helpful on others. It just depends on where you are. If you're a little bit more middle of the road on the height, you might have a little bit more even keel throughout the race zone, so you might not have too much of an advantage or disadvantage on any zone in particular. It might just be more of like a well-rounded height there. So you might not necessarily need that, but for some athletes who are very tall or very short, it does play in. Another one here is body weight and muscle mass. So if you are a heavier individual, then pushing that tank is gonna feel a lot easier because you have a lot more weight behind you to be able to push the tank a little bit faster, more powerfully. Likewise, if you're heavier and have a little more muscle mass than that bike, you might be able to rev it up and have a little bit more powerful bike than somebody who is very small or doesn't have as much muscle mass. And on the flip side of that, things like running or things like the box might be a little bit more difficult with somebody carrying a little bit more weight behind them, because that's going to add extra impact on your joints, and the box might be a little bit harder to navigate if you're heavier. So that's something to think about if you or your teammate is a little heavier or a little bit lighter. Likewise, some of the weights in the race might be a little bit more difficult for lighter individuals if their body mass and the weights are closer in relative size. So for example, one of the athletes I know weighs $130, right? And he is having to lift those 60-pound dumbbells, which is very close to his body weight, which means that station is really hard for him. Same thing with the dead ball. That 60-pound dead ball is almost 50% of his body weight. So relatively, that is a very difficult station for him versus me. I weigh more than him. And so for me to do the 40-pound dumbbells or for me to do the 40-pound dead ball, it just makes sense that I take those stations if I team up with that athlete, because relative to our body weight, those stations are easier for me. So thinking about weight in those situations as well is really helpful. Third up is speed and agility. If you have a speedy, fast, or very agile athlete, then it could be really helpful to put those athletes on something like the box over or the burpees that takes a little bit more speed, quickness to get through, because that quick change of direction on this farmer, or box overs, getting over the box really efficiently, or even burpees, getting up and down from the floor really quickly, can really, really help you in a race if you leverage that properly and leave them more fresh for those stations. And on the flip side of that, if you have a power strength athlete, then putting them on stations like the lunges, like the bike, and like the tank could really save your other partner for other movements to help you with. And fifth one here is age. If you have a masters or a youth competitor that you're working with, then letting them take some of those heavyweight stations is going to be really, really helpful in saving you. So if you are the standard individual, taking the ergs and the machine work, the tank is going to be really helpful. Whereas if you are the youth or masters individual, then taking the lunges, the sit-up, the farmer, the dead balls, and the burpee are going to be really helpful. You don't have to take all of those stations by yourself, but at least taking majority or helping out the standard athlete is going to be really helpful. And some of those weights are even 50% of what the standard athletes have to lift. So depending on gender and depending on where you are. But it could really, really help turn the tide of your race if you leverage those specific zones. And like I said, specifically for that example, the standard athlete taking most of the tank would be very helpful, because if the youth or masters athlete is used to a lower tank setting, then that standard athlete might need to help out there a little bit more, because it might be a little bit disproportionately difficult for the masters or youth athlete than it would be for the standard athlete. Just depends on what their strength threshold is and what they're normally used to training on. If you're training on the standard weight, then take the standard tank, it doesn't matter. But if you're used to training on your masters or youth tank and you have to do a standard or even standard male tank, you know, for a master's female, that would be really, really hard. So it just depends on what the difference is and where you are specifically in your training. But I hope these considerations help. This is the thought process I go through when I create strategies for my athletes and myself, and it really, really comes in handy when you think about all those little things that you can start leveraging and turning to your advantage, and then all the different things that make it either worth it or not worth it on the swaps, to where you're able to find that perfect balance of a quick and efficient time for you and your athletes. So I hope this helps. If it does, leave me a comment or thumbs up below. And before you go, don't forget to check out my newsletter, Fit Tips, which drops every Monday with some of my best training tips. And of course, if you're looking to train for Deka or another hybrid race, then I have my online coaching program, Hybrid Strength, where I help athletes prep for their races and adventures in everyday life. So I hope this helped, and I'll see you back for episode 2 and 3. See you later. Bye.